The Last Stand. Sergeant Nathan Cooper stared at the ceiling of his cell, counting the microscopic imperfections in the metallic surface for what must have been the 1,000th time. The chrixal's obsession with perfection made these tiny flaws stand out like stars in the night sky. 3 years, 2 months, and approximately 15 days, that's how long he'd been their guest, though the exact count was getting harder to maintain. The memory of that fateful day at Research Station Echo 7 remained crystal clear in his mind. He'd been assigned there as part of the minimal security detail, just 4 Marines protecting 32 scientists studying atmospheric anomalies on the outer colony world of New Horizon. The attack came without warning, without declaration, without mercy. The chrixal had expected an easy conquest. What they got instead was a lesson in human tenacity that would echo through their empire for generations to come. Nathan closed his eyes, remembering the chaos, the screams, the unexpected valor of civilians who refused to go quietly into the night. Dr. Sarah Chen, the lead atmospheric scientist, had turned her research equipment into makeshift EMPs. Dr. Rodriguez, the quiet botanist, used his knowledge of local flora to create toxic smoke screens. And Nathan had turned the entire facility into a fortress, using everything from maintenance robots to climate control systems as weapons. They held out for 72 hours. 3 days of constant assault, 3 days of watching colleagues and friends fall, 3 days of showing the chrixal that humanity wouldn't break easily. In the end, Nathan was the only one left standing, surrounded by the bodies of both his people and nearly 200 chrixal warriors. The door to his cell hummed, interrupting his thoughts. The familiar shift in artificial gravity told him visitors were coming. 2 guards entered, their crystalline armor gleaming under the harsh lights. Behind them came Zurich, his primary interrogator for the past 3 years. "Comfortable, Sergeant Cooper?" Zurich's translated voice carried its usual mix of fascination and frustration. Nathan sat up slowly, maintaining the deliberate, measured movements that he knew unnerved them. The chrixal were a species of swift, decisive action. His calculated stillness was a psychological weapon he'd crafted over years of captivity. "The accommodations lovely as always," Nathan replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Though I still think the color scheme could use some work. All this chrome and silver, it lacks personality." Zurich's upper appendages twitched slightly, a tell Nathan had learned to recognize as annoyance. "Your continued attempts at humor do you no credit, Sergeant. The Elder arrives today." That was new information. In 3 years of captivity, Nathan had learned the chrixal hierarchy well enough to know that elders rarely left their homeworlds. Their presence signified matters of extreme importance. "I'm honored," Nathan said, keeping his voice level while his mind raced with possibilities. "Should I dress for the occasion?" The guards moved forward, their movements precise and practiced. They'd learned early on not to underestimate him. The first team that tried to restrain him had learned that lesson the hard way. Nathan let them secure his restraints, all while observing every detail of their movements, their equipment, their positioning. Something was different today. The guards were wearing newer armor, their weapons looked more advanced, and there was an underlying tension in their movements that hadn't been there before. The Elder's visit wasn't just a routine inspection, something had changed. As they led him through the corridors of the detention facility, Nathan noticed other changes. Additional security checkpoints, new scanning equipment, and more guards than usual. The chrixal were pulling out all the stops for this visit. They brought him to an interrogation room he'd never seen before. Unlike the stark, utilitarian spaces he was used to, this room had an almost ceremonial feel to it. The walls were adorned with symbols he recognized from his studies of chrixal culture, marks of authority and power. The restraints they used to secure him to the chair were different too, stronger, more elaborate. They were expecting something. Nathan kept his expression neutral, but his mind was working overtime. Every change, every deviation from routine was a piece of information, and information was power. Xeric positioned himself near the door, his posture more rigid than usual. The elder will have questions. It would be wise to answer them promptly and respectfully. Nathan raised an eyebrow. After 3 years, Xeric, when have I ever been anything but respectful? The door opened before Xeric could respond. The figure that entered made Nathan's breath catch in his throat, not from fear, but from pure tactical assessment. The elder was massive, easily 9 feet tall, with armor that seemed to shift colors like oil on water. But it was the elder's eyes that caught Nathan's attention, multifaceted crystals that seemed to contain galaxies. So, the elder's voice resonated through the translation system, carrying harmonics that made Nathan's teeth vibrate. This is the human who single-handedly defeated our most elite assault team. The one who turned a scientific research station into a killing ground. The one who refuses to break. Nathan met those crystalline eyes steadily. I prefer to go by Nathan. Or Sergeant Cooper, if we're being formal. The elder moved closer, its massive form looming over Nathan. Do you know why I'm here, Sergeant Cooper? I assumed it wasn't for my sparkling personality, Nathan replied, his mind racing ahead, analyzing possibilities, looking for opportunities. The elder's next words confirmed what Nathan had suspected for months. You've created quite a problem for us, Sergeant. Your performance at Echo 7 has become something of a legend. Not just among humans, but across several species. The tale of how a handful of scientists and 4 Marines held off an elite Crixel force has spread far beyond your borders. Nathan kept his expression neutral, but inside, his heart soared. They hadn't died for nothing. Their sacrifice had meant something. The story had gotten out, had spread, had become something more than just another tragic footnote in humanity's history. The elder continued, its voice carrying a note of what might have been respect. Some are calling it the beginning of the end of Crixel expansion. If a small research station could inflict such losses, what would a prepared military installation be capable of? What would a full human fleet do? Interesting question, Nathan said carefully. Though I suspect you didn't come all this way just to discuss military hypotheticals. The elder's crystalline eyes seemed to pulse with internal light. No, I didn't. I came to understand. To learn what makes your species so resilient. And perhaps, to offer you a choice. Nathan's restraints suddenly released with a soft click. The guards raised their weapons, but the elder waved them down. You've been offered freedom before, the elder said. In exchange for information, for cooperation, for various forms of submission. You've refused every time. So I'm offering you something different, a chance to fight for it. Nathan stood slowly, rubbing his wrists where the restraints had been. I'm listening. A combat trial. You against our champions. If you win, you go free, not just to return to your people, but with data that could help them prepare for what's coming. If you lose. The elder's voice trailed off meaningfully. Nathan looked around the room, taking in the guards, the weapons, the exits. And if I refuse? Then you return to your cell, and we continue as before. But know this, the legend of Echo 7 has already served its purpose. Whether you participate or not, war is coming. The only question is how many will die before it's over. Nathan thought of his fallen comrades at Echo 7. Of Dr. Chen's last stand in the atmospheric control room. Of Private Rodriguez's sacrifice to buy the others time to fortify their position. Of all the brave men and women who had died showing the galaxy that humanity wouldn't go quietly into the night. He looked the elder directly in its crystalline eyes. When do we start? Trial by combat. The combat arena was nothing like Nathan had expected. Instead of the stark, metallic environments he'd grown accustomed to in Crixel facilities, this space was almost organic in nature. Crystalline structures rose from the ground like frozen waves, creating a landscape that was both beautiful and treacherous. The arena's ceiling was a dome of transparent material that revealed the alien sky above, where 3 moons hung like pale eyes watching the proceedings below. The arena of ascension, the elder explained as Nathan studied his surroundings. For 10,000 cycles, this has been where the Crixel test their finest warriors. You are the first non-Crixel to ever stand here. Nathan ran his hand along one of the crystal formations, feeling its smooth, cold surface. I'm honored, he said, meaning it. Whatever else the Crixel might be, they were a species that valued tradition and ceremony. This wasn't just a fight, it was a cultural milestone. The elder gestured toward a rack of weapons along the arena's wall. Choose your implements carefully, Sergeant Cooper. You will face 3 trials, each designed to test different aspects of combat prowess. Your opponents will be champions selected from our most elite warrior castes. Nathan approached the weapon rack, his trained eye assessing each option. The Crixel weapons were clearly designed for their unique physiology, multiple handling points, crystalline focusing arrays, and gravity manipulation systems. But among them, he spotted something that made his heart skip a beat: human weapons, salvaged from Echo 7. His fingers wrapped around the familiar grip of an M42 combat rifle. The weight was comforting, like greeting an old friend. He also selected a combat knife and, after some consideration, one of the Crixel gravity manipulators. When in Rome, after all. Interesting choices, the elder observed. Most would have chosen only Crixel weapons, thinking they would be more powerful. Nathan checked the rifle's mechanism, pleased to find it well maintained. The most powerful weapon isn't always the best choice. Sometimes familiarity counts for more than raw power. A resonating tone filled the arena, and Nathan felt the artificial gravity shift slightly. From 3 different entrances, his opponents emerged. The first was a towering Crixel warrior in crimson armor, wielding what appeared to be a staff that crackled with energy. The second was smaller but moved with a fluid grace that spoke of deadly precision. The third remained in the shadows, barely visible except for the gleam of its crystalline eyes. Your first trial begins now, the elder announced, moving to an elevated observation platform. Victory is achieved through incapacitation or submission. Death is discouraged, but not forbidden. Nathan took up a position behind one of the crystal formations, his mind already mapping out the terrain, identifying choke points and potential cover. The crimson-armored warrior stepped forward first, its staff leaving trails of energy in the air as it moved. I am Corax, it announced through the translation system. First blade of the sunset clade. You face me first, human. Nathan didn't respond verbally. Instead, he fired 3 precise shots, not at Corax, but at the crystal formation above the warrior's head. The shots shattered the crystal, sending a shower of razor-sharp shards down. Corax rolled forward with impressive speed, but Nathan had anticipated this. He triggered the gravity manipulator, creating a localized field that sent the crystal shards swirling in a deadly vortex. Corax's energy staff flared, creating a protective barrier, but the continuing crystal storm forced the warrior to remain defensive. Nathan used this opportunity to change positions, always keeping multiple crystal formations between himself and the other 2 opponents. Clever, Corax called out, genuine appreciation in its translated voice. Using our own arena against us. But cleverness alone will not save you. The warrior charged forward, staff spinning in complex patterns that would have been impossible for a human to replicate with only 2 arms. Nathan waited until the last possible moment before diving sideways, using the gravity manipulator to enhance his jump. As he sailed through the air, he fired a burst from the M42, targeting the joints in Corax's armor, points he'd memorized during his years of captivity. Several shots found their mark, causing Corax's armor to spark and stutter. The warrior's movements became less fluid, more mechanical, as backup systems engaged. But Nathan wasn't done. He landed behind another crystal formation and immediately fired at its base, calculating angles and trajectories in his head. The crystal toppled, and Nathan used the gravity manipulator to direct its fall. Corax, still recovering from the armor damage, couldn't move fast enough. The crystal formation crashed down, pinning the warrior's legs. An impressive display, the elder's voice echoed through the arena. But you still face 2 more opponents, and they have been studying your tactics. As if on cue, the second warrior emerged from behind a crystal formation, moving with that same liquid grace Nathan had noticed earlier. This one wore armor that seemed to bend light around it, making its exact position difficult to track. "I am Sylvaris," the warrior introduced itself, its voice carrying harmonics that made Nathan's head spin. "Second shadow of the twilight clade. Your projectile weapons will find no purchase here." Nathan had already noted how the light bent and warped around Sylvaris's armor. Some kind of active camouflage, probably combined with energy shielding. The M42 would indeed be less effective against this opponent. That's why Nathan threw it at the warrior's head. Sylvaris dodged easily, as expected, but the rifle had never been meant to hit. It was a distraction, covering the real attack, the combat knife, thrown a split second later on a different trajectory. The blade found a gap in the armor's energy field, lodging in the warrior's shoulder joint. But Nathan wasn't done. As Sylvaris staggered from the knife wound, Nathan charged forward, using the gravity manipulator to increase his effective mass. He slammed into the wounded warrior with the force of a small car, sending them both crashing into a crystal formation. The impact shattered the crystal, and Nathan used the fragments as improvised weapons, directing them with carefully controlled gravity fields. Sylvaris's active camouflage flickered and failed under the barrage. "Submit," Nathan said, holding a particularly large crystal shard to a vulnerable joint in the warrior's armor. For a moment, there was silence. Then, "I submit," Sylvaris announced, its voice carrying a note of what might have been respect. 2 down, 1 to go. But as Nathan turned to face his final opponent, he realized something was wrong. The arena had grown darker, the crystals seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. And in that growing darkness, multiple pairs of crystalline eyes gleamed. The third warrior had brought friends. "Your final trial," the elder announced, "will test more than your combat skills, Sergeant Cooper. It will test your ability to adapt, to overcome, to survive against impossible odds. Much like you did at Echo 7. Nathan retrieved his knife from Sylvaris's armor and picked up a fallen energy staff. In the growing darkness, the crystalline eyes multiplied, surrounding him. He could hear movement from all directions, the soft sound of armored feet on crystal surfaces. "This," Nathan said quietly, "is going to be interesting." The darkness deepened, and the real trial began. Shadows and revelations. In the darkness of the arena of ascension, Nathan Cooper discovered something crucial about the Crixel. They had never truly understood humanity's greatest strength. As multiple opponents circled him in the darkness, their crystalline eyes gleaming like stars, he smiled. The Crixel had inadvertently recreated the exact conditions that had made Echo 7 possible. They had given him nothing to lose and everything to gain. The first attack came from 3 directions simultaneously. Energy weapons pierced the darkness, their beams converging on Nathan's position. But he was already moving, using the gravity manipulator to launch himself upward while triggering the energy staff he'd acquired. The staff's discharge created a brief electromagnetic pulse that illuminated his attackers, 6 of them, arranged in a precise geometric pattern. "Interesting formation," Nathan called out, his voice echoing off the crystal structures. "Standard Crixel assault pattern Delta 7, right? We studied your tactical manuals extensively at Echo 7. That's why we knew exactly where to place the charges." His words had the intended effect. The Crixel warriors hesitated for a fraction of a second, their perfect formation wavering as they processed the implications. Nathan used that moment of uncertainty to strike. He landed behind one warrior and used the gravity manipulator to increase the local gravitational pull exponentially. The warrior, unprepared for the sudden weight of its own armor, stumbled to its knees. "Your species values perfection," Nathan continued, diving between crystal formations as energy beams scarred the air around him. "Everything has to be precise, measured, calculated. But humans? We thrive in chaos." To demonstrate his point, Nathan fired the energy staff at several crystal formations simultaneously. The crystals didn't shatter, instead, they began to resonate, creating interference patterns in the darkness. The Crixel warriors' active camouflage systems started to malfunction, their light-bending properties disrupted by the crystalline resonance. "At Echo 7, we didn't win because we were stronger or better armed," Nathan explained, taking down another warrior with a precisely aimed strike to its armor's power core. "We won because we were willing to do the unexpected, the irrational, the seemingly impossible." The remaining warriors regrouped, adopting a new formation. But Nathan had been counting on this. He threw his captured energy staff high into the air, its power core set to overload. The warriors tracked its arc, weapons ready, exactly as he'd planned. "Like this," Nathan said, and activated the gravity manipulator at maximum power. The crystal floor beneath the warriors suddenly became as weightless as paper, entire sections lifting into the air. At the same time, the overloading energy staff detonated, creating a cascade of electromagnetic pulses that sent the floating crystal shards spinning in all directions. The warriors, their gravity systems compromised, tumbled through the chaos of floating crystals and electromagnetic interference. But Nathan wasn't done. As the warriors struggled to reorient themselves in the zero-gravity environment, he used his knowledge of Crixel armor systems to his advantage. Each precise strike disabled a power core, a gravity generator, or a weapon system. Within moments, the remaining warriors were effectively neutralized. The arena lights slowly returned to normal levels, revealing the aftermath of the battle. 6 Crixel warriors lay incapacitated among the floating crystal debris, their advanced armor systems offline or malfunctioning. "Impressive," the Elder's voice resonated through the arena. "But you haven't faced your final opponent yet." From the shadows emerged a figure that made Nathan's blood run cold. The armor was unlike anything he'd seen before, not the metallic or crystalline constructs of the other warriors, but something that seemed to be made of living shadow itself. The figure moved with a fluidity that made the previous warriors look clumsy in comparison. "I am Nexus," the figure spoke, its voice bypassing the translation system entirely and appearing directly in Nathan's mind. "I am not here to fight you, Sergeant Cooper. I am here to show you the truth." Before Nathan could react, the arena around them began to change. The crystal formations melted away like ice under a hot sun, revealing something that made Nathan's heart stop. He was back at Echo 7, but not as he remembered it. He was seeing it through Crixel eyes. "What is this?" Nathan demanded, watching as scenes from that fateful battle played out around him. "The truth you were never meant to see," Nexus replied. "Watch carefully, Sergeant. See why the Elder really came." The scenes shifted rapidly, Dr. Chen's last stand in the atmospheric control room, but now Nathan could see the fear in the Crixel soldiers' eyes as their armor systems failed inexplicably. Dr. Rodriguez's final moments, but now Nathan understood why the Crixel had been unable to breach his toxic barriers. Their environmental systems had been specifically targeted by a computer virus that shouldn't have existed. "We didn't just attack a research station," Nexus continued. "We attacked a facility that had already deeply infiltrated our systems, that knew our weaknesses, that was prepared for us. Echo 7 wasn't just a defensive victory, Sergeant Cooper. It was a trap." The implications hit Nathan like a physical blow. The scientists' unexpected preparedness, their surprisingly effective countermeasures, the way they had known exactly where to strike. It hadn't been just luck or human ingenuity. They had been ready. They had been waiting. Your superiors sent you there to protect scientists, Nexus said, the illusory scenes fading away. But not all of them were what they claimed to be. Echo 7 was a test, Sergeant Cooper. Not of our strength, but of our vulnerabilities. And now the Elder must decide what to do with this knowledge, and with you. Nathan stood in the center of the now empty arena, his mind racing with questions. Everything he thought he knew about Echo 7, about his own role in that battle, had just been turned upside down. But one thing remained certain: he couldn't let the Elder take this information back to the Crixel homeworld. So, Nathan said, readying himself for what he knew would be the real final trial, what happens now? Nexus's shadowy form seemed to smile, though it had no visible face. Now, Sergeant Cooper, you make a choice. The same choice your commanders gave you when they assigned you to Echo 7, do you follow orders, or do you follow your conscience? The arena's crystals began to resonate again, but this time, Nathan saw something in their reflections that changed everything, the truth about why he had really been chosen for Echo 7, and what it would mean for the coming war. The weight of truth. The crystalline reflections showed Nathan more than just memories, they revealed an intricate web of deception that spanned both human and Crixel space. In the faceted surfaces, he saw classified meetings where human intelligence officers discussed the Crixel threat years before first contact. He saw Dr. Chen's real credentials, not just an atmospheric scientist, but one of Earth's top xenotechnology experts. He saw himself being selected for Echo 7, not for his combat skills, but for his psychological profile. Subject displays exceptional adaptive thinking and moral flexibility while maintaining strong ethical foundations. Your silence is telling, Nexus observed, its shadowy form rippling like smoke in the arena's dim light. You're seeing the bigger picture now, aren't you? Nathan's mind raced through years of memories, recontextualizing every moment. The strange equipment deliveries to Echo 7 that weren't on any official manifest. The endless drills that seemed excessive for a research station. The way Dr. Chen had known exactly how to disable Crixel systems during the attack. We weren't just studying atmospheric anomalies, Nathan said quietly. We were studying them. The Crixel. Everything at Echo 7 was a front. The Elder's voice resonated through the arena. Just as our attack was not merely an act of conquest. We had detected your surveillance, your probing of our defense systems. Echo 7 represented a threat that had to be eliminated. But in trying to remove that threat, we created something far more dangerous, a legend. Nathan turned to face the Elder's observation platform. The legend of how a small research station held off an elite Crixel force. The story that's spreading across the galaxy, making other species question Crixel power. He paused, understanding dawning. That's why you brought me here. Not just to test me, but to control the narrative. Perceptive, the Elder acknowledged. If you died in honorable combat during these trials, the legend would be complete, a noble warrior falling in glorious battle. If you won, we could present it as proof of our enlightened leadership, willing to acknowledge and honor worthy opponents. Either way, the story would serve our purposes. But now there's a third option, Nexus interjected, its mental voice carrying an undercurrent of what might have been amusement. Because now you know the truth about both sides. The humans who turned a research station into a covert intelligence operation, and the Crixel who would sacrifice an elite assault force to eliminate a single threat. Nathan looked at the gravity manipulator in his hand, then at the disabled warriors scattered around the arena. Everything he'd believed about Echo 7, about his own role in that battle, had been based on lies. But the courage of those who died there, that had been real. The thing about legends, Nathan said slowly, is that they take on a life of their own. The truth of Echo 7 doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what people believe it represents, hope. Hope that the mighty Crixel can be resisted, that they're not invincible. The Elder descended from the observation platform, its crystalline eyes focused intently on Nathan. And what will you do with this knowledge, Sergeant Cooper? Your victory in these trials has earned you the right to return to your people. Will you tell them the truth about Echo 7? About their own government's deceptions? Nathan thought of all those who had died at Echo 7, not just the soldiers and scientists, but the Chronicle warriors as well. All of them pawns in a larger game they hadn't fully understood. I propose a different option, Nathan said, straightening to his full height. One that neither side has considered. He took a step forward, his voice carrying the weight of conviction. The legend of Echo 7 is spreading, making other species question Chronicle dominance. But what if we could use that legend for something more than propaganda? What if we could turn it into a foundation for real change? Nexus moved closer, its shadowy form solidifying slightly. Explain. The Chronicle value perfection, order, hierarchy. Humans value adaptability, innovation, chaos. At Echo 7, both sides learned something important: neither approach is inherently superior. The scientists' careful planning and the warriors' perfect formations both failed in the face of unexpected variables. Nathan gestured to the arena around them. These trials weren't just about testing my combat skills. They were about understanding how humans think, how we adapt, how we turn chaos into advantage. But what if instead of using that knowledge to fight each other, we used it to complement each other? The elder's crystalline eyes pulsed with internal light. You are proposing an alliance? After everything that has happened? I'm proposing something more radical, Nathan replied. A complete reimagining of both our society's approaches. The Chronicle have technology and discipline that humanity could learn from. Humans have creativity and adaptability that could benefit the Chronicle. Echo 7 proved that both sides are capable of surprising each other, so let's make that surprise constructive instead of destructive. A low hum filled the arena as the elder considered Nathan's words. The remaining crystal formations seemed to vibrate in sympathy, creating complex patterns of light and shadow. An interesting proposal, the elder finally said. But one that faces significant obstacles. There are those on both sides who would resist such a radical change. Of course there are, Nathan agreed. That's why we need the legend. Echo 7 is already a symbol, let's shape what it symbolizes. Not just a story of resistance, but a story of potential. A reminder that when humans and Chronicle clash, we're capable of forcing each other to evolve, to adapt, to become something new. Nexus's form shifted, taking on a more solid appearance. The warrior speaks wisdom beyond his station. But words alone will not be enough. Such a change would require proof, demonstration, sacrifice. Nathan smiled grimly. I know. That's why I'm not finished with these trials yet. He turned to face the elder directly. You offered me freedom if I won. I'm offering you something different, a chance to write the next chapter of the legend together. But first, there's one more test I need to pass. The elder's crystalline eyes flared with sudden understanding. You wish to face me in combat. Not just combat, Nathan replied, his voice carrying the weight of everything he'd learned. I want to show both our species what's possible when order and chaos work together instead of against each other. One final trial, not to prove superiority, but to demonstrate potential. The arena's crystals began to pulse with energy as the elder descended fully into the combat space. Around them, the disabled warriors stirred, watching as history prepared to take an unexpected turn. Very well, Sergeant Cooper, the elder said, its form beginning to shift and change in ways that defied human comprehension. Show us what the legend of Echo 7 can truly become. Legends are made. The arena of ascension fell silent as the elder's transformation completed. Where once stood a towering figure of crystalline majesty, now writhed a being of pure energy and purpose, its form shifting between states of matter like a dream caught between sleeping and waking. The surviving crystal formations pulsed in sympathy with the elder's power, creating an aurora of impossible colors throughout the arena. Nathan stood his ground, though every human instinct screamed at him to retreat. This was what he'd been working toward since his revelation, not just a fight, but a demonstration of what could be possible when two radically different species chose to understand rather than destroy each other. Before we begin, the Elder's voice resonated through the arena, bypassing normal sound to vibrate directly in Nathan's bones. Know that I cannot hold back. The energies I contain would destroy me if I attempted to restrain them. Are you certain this is the path you choose? Nathan checked his remaining equipment, the gravity manipulator, now humming with barely contained power, the combat knife, its edge gleaming with an almost eager light, and most importantly, the knowledge he'd gained about both human and chronicle capabilities. Holding back wouldn't serve either of our purposes, Nathan replied. This needs to be real. Both our species need to see what's possible when order and chaos dance together. The Elder's form pulsed with what might have been approval. Then let us begin the final trial. Show us your vision, Sergeant Cooper. The attack came without warning, a wave of pure gravitational force that would have liquefied a normal human. But Nathan was ready. He'd spent 3 years studying chronicle technology, and the past few hours had taught him more about their capabilities than any previous observation. He activated his gravity manipulator at precisely the right moment, not to resist the Elder's attack, but to redirect it. The gravitational wave curved around him, catching the floating crystal shards from the previous battles and sending them spinning in complex orbits. First lesson, Nathan called out as he moved through the storm of crystals. Humans don't try to overcome superior force, we find ways to use it against itself. The Elder's response was a burst of electromagnetic energy that should have fried every piece of technology in Nathan's possession. Instead, he used the crystal shards as refractors, splitting the energy into a prismatic web that illuminated the entire arena. Second lesson, Nathan continued, never stopping his movement. Your perfect formations and precise calculations are incredible strengths, but they can also be predictable. To demonstrate, he threw his combat knife directly at the Elder's core. The being of energy easily shifted its form to allow the blade to pass through harmlessly, exactly as Nathan had expected. The knife embedded itself in a crystal formation behind the Elder, completing a geometric pattern Nathan had been setting up since the battle began. The Elder's form rippled with what might have been amusement. You seek to use our own principles of sacred geometry against us? Ambitious, but... The being's words cut off as the pattern activated. The knife had been the final point needed to create a perfect chronicle harmony matrix, a geometric formation that resonated with their very being. The crystal formations began to sing, producing frequencies that humans couldn't hear but that made the Elder's energetic form waver and pulse. Third lesson, Nathan said, his voice carrying over the crystalline resonance. True strength comes from understanding your opponent so well that you can see beyond the battle, to what you could become together. The Elder's form stabilized, but not by breaking the harmony matrix. Instead, it began to flow with the resonance, turning the disruptive frequencies into a symphony of light and energy. The arena itself seemed to breathe as two fundamentally different approaches to existence, human chaos and chronicle order, found an unexpected harmony. Most impressive, the Elder acknowledged, its form still flowing with the crystal song. You've learned our ways well enough to use them, yet you remain uniquely human in your application. But this demonstration, while powerful, is still just that, a demonstration. How would this principle apply beyond this arena? Nathan moved to the center of the harmony matrix, feeling the energies flow around and through him. Echo 7 proved that humans can adapt to and overcome chronicle tactics. These trials prove that the chronicle can recognize and respect human ingenuity. But both were still about conflict, about proving superiority. I'm proposing something different. He raised the gravity manipulator, not as a weapon, but as a conductor's baton. The crystal formations responded, their resonance changing to create new patterns of light and energy. Imagine Crixel precision combined with human creativity, Nathan continued. Your technology merged with our adaptability. Your order balanced by our chaos. Echo 7 showed what happens when we fight each other, but it also proved that both our species are capable of extraordinary growth when challenged. The Elder's form shifted, condensing into something more humanoid but still crackling with energy. And you believe you can convince your people to consider this path? After Echo 7? After 3 years of captivity? I believe the legend of Echo 7 is already convincing them, Nathan replied. But not in the way either side intended. It's not just a story about resistance anymore, it's become a story about possibility. About what happens when two species push each other to evolve. He gestured to the harmony matrix surrounding them. This arena proves it's possible. We can find balance between order and chaos, between precision and adaptability. The real question is, are both our species brave enough to try? The Elder was silent for a long moment, its crystalline eyes studying Nathan with an intensity that seemed to peer into his very soul. Finally, it spoke. You came to these trials seeking freedom, Sergeant Cooper. Instead, you may have found something far more valuable, a way forward. The Elder's form fully solidified, becoming once again the majestic being that had first entered the arena. The legend of Echo 7 will indeed continue to spread, but perhaps now it can spread with a different message. Nathan lowered the gravity manipulator, feeling the weight of the moment. Not just a story of war and resistance, but a story of transformation. Of what becomes possible when enemies become catalysts for each other's evolution. The crystal formations gradually dimmed, their song fading to a gentle hum. The disabled warriors who had witnessed the entire exchange began to stir, their armor systems coming back online. Return to your people, Sergeant Cooper, the Elder commanded. Tell them what you've learned, what you've seen. Show them the possibility that exists beyond conflict. The Crixel will do the same. And Echo 7? Nathan asked. Will remain what it has become, a legend. But now, perhaps, it can be a legend that unites rather than divides. A reminder that the greatest victories sometimes come not from destroying our opponents, but from learning to see through their eyes. Nathan nodded, understanding the responsibility that now rested on his shoulders. He had entered the arena of ascension as a prisoner seeking freedom. He would leave it as something else entirely, not just a warrior, not just a symbol, but a bridge between two species who had never realized how much they could learn from each other. As he prepared to leave the arena, Nathan looked back one last time at the Elder. You know this won't be easy. There will be resistance on both sides. The Elder's crystalline eyes pulsed with what might have been humor. Of course. Change never is easy. But then again, neither was holding off an elite Crixel assault force with nothing but scientists and 4 Marines. Sometimes, Sergeant Cooper, the impossible simply requires the right legend to make it possible. Nathan smiled, feeling the weight of his new purpose. The legend of Echo 7 had begun with a last stand. Now it would continue with a first step, toward understanding, toward growth, toward a future neither humans nor Crixel had imagined possible. The next chapter was about to begin.